Welcome to the channel. Here we uncover the hidden stories behind the biggest moments in history, the moments that shaped the modern world in ways most people never realize. Today, we're going to reveal the weapon that helped defeat Nazi Germany, not with brute force, not with bombs or tanks, but with something far more dangerous. You'll discover why German generals secretly admired it, how one desperate engineer working under impossible pressure changed the course of World War II, and why this simple machine exposed a fatal weakness in the Nazi war machine. Stay with me, because this story has twists that will completely change how you see the war.
If you had asked German generals in 1945 which American weapon terrified them the most, you might expect them to name the Sherman tank, the B-17 bomber, or the devastating American artillery that seemed to have endless ammunition. But their real answer shocked everyone who heard it. On a spring day in 1945, columns of defeated Wehrmacht generals walked into Allied prisoner camps across Germany. Among the officers interviewing them was Hugh M. Cole, a United States Army historian serving on the staff of General George S. Patton. Cole asked these experienced commanders a simple question: which American weapon had impressed them most during the war? These men had seen entire cities erased by bombing. They had watched armored divisions smash through their defenses. They had survived artillery strikes so intense that some believed the Americans had unlimited shells. Yet their answer was not a tank, not a bomber, and not a gun. It was a small, open vehicle that looked so simple, many soldiers joked it resembled a farm machine with wheels. They said the most impressive American weapon was the Jeep. The answer surprised Allied officers, but it revealed something much deeper. Because the Jeep represented an advantage Germany had completely misunderstood from the very beginning of the war. 7,000 miles away, in a quiet factory office in Toledo, Ohio, a 56-year-old freelance engineer had once drawn the basic design of that vehicle in only 5 days. His name was Karl Probst. He had no team of designers, no advanced testing facilities, no time. He had only a deadline that most experts considered impossible. The United States Army had given manufacturers just 49 days to produce a working prototype of a completely new type of military vehicle. Most companies refused even to bid. The risk was too high, and failure could destroy their reputations. But Probst accepted. At the same time, across the Atlantic, Adolf Hitler and his advisors believed something very different. They saw America as weak, soft, and incapable of matching German engineering. To them, the United States was a nation of businessmen, not warriors, a nation of mass production, not precision. German intelligence reports throughout the 1930s repeated the same conclusion again and again. American factories produced refrigerators, radios, and cheap automobiles. They did not produce precision weapons. American workers lacked discipline and technical skill. Their designs were crude, their materials cheap, their standards low. This belief seemed logical at the time. In 1939, the United States Army ranked only 17th in the world. It was smaller than the armies of Portugal and Romania. Military spending had been cut for years during the Great Depression. German engineers examined American cars and laughed. Compared to European machines, they looked rough and simplified. Tolerances were loose. Components were interchangeable. Everything seemed designed for speed and cost, not perfection. But this was exactly the point. The American system was never designed to create perfect machines. It was designed to create millions of good enough machines faster than anyone else on Earth. While Germany built masterpieces, America built systems, and that difference would eventually decide the war. In 1940, as France collapsed and Britain fought for survival, the United States Army realized it needed a new kind of vehicle. Motorcycles with sidecars were too limited. Trucks were too heavy and slow. The battlefield was becoming more mobile, and the Army needed speed, flexibility, and reliability. They wanted something revolutionary. A lightweight four-wheel drive vehicle that could travel across mud, sand, snow, and jungle. It had to carry soldiers, weapons, and equipment. It had to move fast on roads and crawl through difficult terrain. It had to do everything. The requirements were extreme, and most major manufacturers simply refused. General Motors said no. Ford said no. Chrysler said no. The project seemed doomed. Only two struggling companies stepped forward. One was Willys Overland, barely surviving after the Great Depression. The other was the tiny American Bantam Car Company, desperate to stay alive. Desperation often drives innovation. Bantam's president knew his company could not complete the project alone. So he contacted Karl Probst, a freelance engineer with decades of experience. At first, Probst refused. The pay was small. The timeline was impossible. But when he studied the Army's requirements, something changed. He realized war was coming, and this was a chance to help prepare his country. He agreed to work for just $200. In July 1940, he arrived at Bantam's factory and began designing. He had only 5 days. Working almost without sleep, he and a small team produced a full set of drawings. The Army reviewed Bantam's proposal and made a decision in just 30 minutes. Now they had 49 days to build the vehicle. The team worked around the clock. They scavenged parts from existing cars. They built frames from scratch. They shaped metal by hand. They slept on the factory floor. And when the deadline arrived, Probst personally drove the prototype hundreds of miles to the test center, arriving only minutes before time expired. The Army tested the vehicle. It climbed hills that stopped other machines. It crossed rivers. It moved through terrain that trapped trucks. But designing the Jeep was only the beginning. Because the real challenge was not invention. It was production. And that was the moment when America's industrial power would begin to overwhelm Nazi Germany. If you enjoy stories about the hidden forces that shaped history, let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like the video. It helps the channel grow and allows us to bring you more powerful stories like this. What happened next shocked German commanders across Africa and Europe, and
By
revealed a weakness
1942, the
in the
Jeep had already
Nazi
begun to
war
transform the
machine
battlefield.
that would become
Small, fast American
impossible
units
to
moved where no one
overcome.
expected, striking quickly and disappearing just as suddenly. Reconnaissance teams mapped enemy positions, supply lines were maintained, and command decisions were transmitted across vast distances in record time. The German army struggled to respond.
The deserts of North Africa, the hills of Italy, and the fields of Normandy all saw the same effect. Mobility became decisive. The Jeep allowed American forces to outmaneuver, outpace, and outsmart an opponent that had relied on slower, heavier, and more rigid methods. German units could no longer control the tempo of battle. For every position they defended, Americans were already advancing elsewhere. Beyond combat, the Jeep revolutionized logistics. Supplies, ammunition, and medical evacuation reached frontline units faster than ever. Soldiers could rely on vehicles that were easy to repair and replace. By contrast, German vehicles were fewer, more complex, and vulnerable to breakdowns. Fuel shortages and limited parts only worsened the problem. The imbalance between American mass production and German craftsmanship became undeniable. By 1944 and 1945, this industrial advantage translated directly into battlefield dominance. American armies advanced with relentless momentum, striking, regrouping, and attacking again before German forces could respond. Generals like George S. Patton leveraged the Jeep's mobility to maintain constant pressure, coordinating attacks across hundreds of miles with unprecedented speed. Captured German officers later admitted that they were impressed not by tanks, artillery, or aircraft, but by the Jeep itself. It was a small vehicle that embodied a much larger truth. The United States had turned industrial capacity into a decisive weapon. Speed, reliability, versatility, and numbers combined to create an unstoppable force. The Jeep became more than a vehicle. It became a symbol. It represented the difference between German precision engineering, focused on perfection, and American production philosophy, focused on volume, simplicity, and adaptability. While Germany built masterpieces, America built systems, and in war, systems won. By the end of the conflict, the Jeep had been used in nearly every theater, performing dozens of roles: reconnaissance, supply, ambulance, command, towing artillery, and even as platforms for machine guns. Its impact was felt from the deserts of North Africa to the jungles of the Pacific. American industry had produced hundreds of thousands, while Germany could muster only a fraction of that number. Ultimately, the Jeep's story is the story of how industrial innovation, combined with practical engineering and relentless production, helped secure victory. It turned ideas into action, strategy into execution, and resources into results. What seemed like a simple, open-top vehicle became one of the most influential weapons of World War II, proving that sometimes the smallest things can make the greatest difference.